Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for being here at this hour, because I know it's almost lunchtime and you all must be super hungry. So kudos to you for sticking around. Also, I see some of you kind of squinting, like, hey, who's this guy? There was supposed to be Joseph on stage, the other co-founder of Pwn. And last time I remember seeing him, he was kind of taller and slightly more handsome. So Joseph couldn't make it, so I'm a last-minute replacement. He was supposed to talk about the crypto-native economy report that we produce at Pwn. So I'm not going to go through the numbers for him, because that's his content, but I'm going to touch on some topics that, in a way, relate to being a crypto-native. Also, yeah, my slides are fairly hideous compared to what I saw here previously, so apologies for that. But I think the important thing is the message. Anyways, let's get into that. Reinventing the wheel of finance. Why does even stuff need to be reinvented? I want to start with on a maybe like a slightly bad note, because my thesis is that there is a lot of not so great things in the world, but I also want to sprinkle in some hopium, because I want to make the argument that Web3, our ecosystem, our industry, is very well positioned to fix many of the things. And so hopefully that's going to give a little bit of motivation to a lot of the folks, either here in the room or maybe watching the stream, who are looking at the numbers that are going down, you know, this time of the year. And I want to remind everybody that what we build here is actually meaningful stuff. So yeah, chapter 1. Shit's fucked. If you look anywhere in the world, you see a ton of problems. There is this huge stockpile of problems, you know, from on one side, the cultural wars in America, on the other side, the actual war in Ukraine. You know, you see poverty, you see hunger, you see rising cost of living, all this kind of stuff, which is kind of weird, because if we look at what we were supposed to have by now, we were supposed to have flying cars and unlimited, free, clean, you know, energy to power, you know, all our inventions, and that's clearly not the case. Even though, you know, we might have made some marginal progress, it's still not the case. Now, why would that be a thing? Like, we've landed on Moon more than like 50 years ago, so, you know, clearly there's this progress, and we should be much closer to this than where we are today. Well, my thesis for this is that we are collectively only using maybe like 20%, and it's like my estimate, but we're using only maybe like 20% of our collective brain power as a society. Maybe like 20% of our collective creative potential. And the reason for that is that, you know, more likely than not, there is, you know, somebody who otherwise might have been the next Albert Einstein or Marie Curie, and today they are, you know, working on a scrapyard looking for rare metals, or maybe they are sewing together, you know, the next collection of Nike shoes in a sweatshop. But, you know, in order to build my argument further, I don't even need to go to those extremes, because even if you look at, you know, developed countries, middle-class society, and you look at how many people actually get the opportunity to, you know, shoot their shot when it comes to, you know, developing their idea, developing their genius, and potentially sharing the innovation with the world, you realize that, you know, vast majority of the middle-class kids don't really get to shoot their shot at all these days. And of those who do, of the small minority who do, vast majority actually ends up, you know, failing within the first year. You all know the saying that of all startups, 90% of them fail within the first year. Now, the reason why the middle class kids get only one shot or 0 shots, and the kids in poorer regions get absolutely 0 shots at potentially developing their potential, in my opinion, is due to access to capital. Now, Again, sorry for the hideous slide. Now, the capital in general could be divided into three main sections, in my opinion, especially in relation to the problem that I'm outlining here. It's the cultural capital, it's the social capital, and finally, it's the financial capital. So cultural capital, among other things, includes stuff such as education. I don't need to explain to you that if you want to make a dent in certain industry, you probably need some specific knowledge in that industry. Social capital, again, the well-known saying that your network is your net worth. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then finally, the financial capital, no explanation needed. And the good news is, though, that the part of access to financial capital is exactly what Web3 is very uniquely positioned to solve. And I could make the argument that the financial capital out of these three is actually probably the most important one. Of course, you know, they kind of have a relationship with each other, so that once you boost one, the others also go up. But the financial capital is what we want to be solving in Web3. And I probably don't need to remind you about this, because you've all been building in this space or using the apps in this space, so it's pretty clear. However, there is this concept of reinventing the wheel that needs to be revisited, in my opinion, because as we all know, TradFi is not the direction in which we want to go. Yet I've seen so many builders, so many talented builders and inventors in this space kind of like focused on copy-pasting what we seem to know from TradFi and putting it on chain. So we're kind of stuck in this situation where Web3 is kind of becoming just a TradFi on chain, which in my opinion would be a huge loss if that ends up being the thing that we've developed here. Let's talk about the concept itself. Do not reinvent the wheel. I mean, you all have probably heard this a couple times in your life. I mean, I personally, frankly, I'm guilty of using this phrase a couple of times in my life. But lately I've come to a conclusion that it is just bullshit. And not just that it's a garbage advice, it's something that we should actively try to reinvent every single wheel that we can put our hands on. Just think about it, the quote or the advice kind of disprove itself. If we didn't ever reinvent the wheel, the only feasible way to drive a car today would be to become a Flintstones character, which I'm not. So it's not a great situation. So do reinvent stuff. How does this tie into what we're building? How does this tie into the global financial system? So again, I'm going to go back to something that I don't need to convince you about this. Like probably everybody or majority of people in this room would agree with me on this statement that TradFi is broken. Now, you could lay out the argument that maybe it's broken because it's a corrupt system. Maybe you could lay out the argument that it's rigged in favor of the rich, who are the only ones getting richer at the expense of everyone else. But there is one more aspect that I would like you to think about when you discover the idea that TradFi is broken and why it's broken. And that is that a lot of the pillars, a lot of the fundamental cornerstones on which TradFi is actually built are completely arbitrary. They are completely made up. I made a presentation about this about 3 months ago during ETH Prague, where I talked about, so I'm going to just give you like TLDR version, where I talked about the fact that, for example, the inflation target, which, as a lot of you know, in most developed economies is set at 2%, is something that's been considered immutable. It's been considered a gospel. It's something that influences the life of every single one of us, because the inflation target essentially dictates the monetary policy of the central bank, which in turn results in more or less money circulating in economy, in a nutshell. And so therefore, it influences the individuals in the economy, it influences the businesses in the economy, it influences the government as well. So directly or indirectly, this inflation target, which is set at 2%, touches every single one of us. But if you spend just a little bit of digging, and by that I don't need you to go to CIA archives and like dig through some secret, resources. You can Google for 15 minutes, and you will find out that the 2% inflation target, which drives, the economical properties of most developed economies, is completely made up. A politician in New Zealand needed to put down some number, and so they said, let's make it 2%. It sounds about reasonable, and then somehow magically everybody kind of involuntarily adopted it after the US also adopted it, etc., etc. So, and that's not the only, so that's like, first of all, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. Second of all, that's not the only property. So not only that the system is rigged, the system is corrupt, the system is based on essentially what you could call lies. And now we're kind of like driving inspiration from it when we're developing in this like ultimate financial sandbox that we have in front of us. So essentially what I'm trying to say here is, if you are a builder, if you are an investor who funds builders in this space, if you are a user, if you are a community member, just try weird shit. And every time you're building something, every time you're trying to invent something, try to start with a completely clean slate of paper. Try to see what is the most fundamental piece on top of which you've been building whatever you're building, and try to like completely redefine it. There is no such thing as impossible in the Web3 space, in such a degree that even if you build something that may seem economically unfeasible, you can literally print imaginary money and subsidize the activity until the actual network effect kicks in. So again, if you're a builder, let me see how much time we have. We have seven more minutes roughly. So you can look up on Twitter. There's been this video circulating by David Sachs, a famous technology VC, who essentially said that whenever he's evaluating an idea that he considers for funding, he looks for something that's called product hook, and he looks at that over looking at actual market fundamentals. So David Sachs is not somebody who's primarily focused on crypto investments, and he already says this, that a product hook, which essentially means some, for example, like some UI element or some product aspect that forms habits of users to essentially regularly come back, even if you don't have the actual market fundamentals nailed down, that's still more valuable than the other way around. If you have this like multi-billion dollars market available, but you don't necessarily know how to capture it, which I feel like is the issue with a lot of crypto startups. In Web3, it's super easy to say, if we bank the unbanked, it's going to be like $30 gazillion per year of revenue or whatever. But you need to have a clear way of capturing the audience. So if I take this to a specific conclusion, you can look at, for example, Friends Tech currently as something that a lot of people have dismissed that as like the next Ponzi, as something that doesn't have a clear use case, as something that doesn't have a fundamental value, as a fad, etc., etc. And so while I'm not endorsing it, I'm using it as an example of something that you should, instead of like immediately dismiss it because in your mind the market fundamentals might not be there. But then again, I just a few moments back laid out the idea that the market fundamentals are actually fake. So what are you even looking at, or like what are you even looking for? If you look for market fundamentals, you should proactively explore it. See how you can dig some data about user behavior, some lessons about what people are interested in doing in the space, what works, what doesn't. Try to sprinkle in a little bit of, experimentation. Again, take this back to the fact that we are in this sandbox playbook. And so if you're a builder, build weird shit. If you're an investor, I would also invite you to invest into stuff that might not fundamentally make sense, but has this, for example, interesting user interaction built in it. If you're a user, obviously, you probably do want to try weird shit at this point in the market, because if you look at the previous cycles, this is exactly when the big narratives have been built. Like when NFTs didn't happen during the bull market, the previous bull market. They happened exactly at this moment when everything went down, when everything seemed to be, hopeless, when everybody was starting to lose the sense of the narrative, like why are we even here? And the next big thing usually came out of that. So as a user, you will be able to probably find the diamonds at this very moment. And as a community, of course, let's support those crazy ideas. So yeah, my conclusion is, let's build weird shit, let's fund weird shit, let's try weird shit, because we are morally obliged to do that. For the kids at the very beginning of the presentation, it's kind of like a selfish altruism if you think about it, because we help them. We help onboard their IQ points. If you want to get as fundamental as this, we can onboard their IQ points into the global economy, and we all benefit off of that, and we all can have flying cars and unlimited free energy. And Web3, by providing them with access to financial capital to fully realize their potential capital, their creative potential, is the most important thing right now. Thank you very much.
What a capturing talk. Thank you so much. We have time for questions from the audience. Do we have some?
I realized it was not as technical as some of the previous speakers, but I was hoping to sprinkle a little bit of hopium at this point where Ethereum is like $1,500 today or something.
I was totally captured. Really eloquently spoken. Yeah, we have a question over there, waving.
Thanks. So let's think about one thing, and maybe it's not a good example, but we have molecules in this in the air, correct? And they go to different directions. They go to and also with different speed. So, but the whole contribution of the air in this room is actually 0, so they don't go anywhere. What I want to say is that if you want to give financial capital to everyone and they go to different directions, then the average contribution will be 0. How do you solve this problem?
Well, you're talking about two different things, in my opinion, because you're talking about essentially creating new financial capital versus enabling, access to financial capital. So, as a society, I would say, once we stopped becoming just kind of like groups of hunters and gatherers, we've made a social pact that we will essentially enable anybody who joins our society. In a nutshell, this would be probably like a much deeper talk if we want to get into that. So I think it's our obligation to ensure that everybody has their shot at producing, I guess, manifesting their best self, and in that way also producing for the society. Value for the society. And if you think about it, there are 8 billion people out there right now, and all the Elon Musks and other inventors, Albert Einstein that I've mentioned, Marie Curie, some of them alive, some of them are dead, are only a result of the fact that just a small percentage of the overall society actually got to shoot their shot. And you could argue that, of course, even from the poorest of regions, sometimes there is somebody who somehow makes it through, but those are exceptions rather than the rule. And so my thesis is that right now, the people in this room and on this conference and majority of people in this city and in this country are actually, in a way privileged we are wealthy people compared to the rest of the society, but we are not as wealthy as we could be if everybody actually produced their full potential. So that's the whole idea. Right now, what we have here is a result of only a small percentage of people being fully enabled in the productive activities. And my thesis is that we should work very proactively to get the rest on board as well. Increase their wealth and therefore increase our wealth as well.
Do we have another question?
Hi. It's all a little bit new to me, but my question would be, because you're saying you want to, or we should reinvent the wheel, do you think that your goals would be able to be achieved without the TradFi? I mean, yeah, getting financial, giving the people who don't have banking financial support without the traditional way of, traditional monetary way.
So yeah, I mean, I see your point. It's kind of like a stepping stone, which is absolutely, I would absolutely 100% agree with that. But the point is that the stepping stone is flawed in a way that doesn't allow to use it to build the whole world in a sense, right? So my thesis is that we must come to different conclusions. We must build the new generation of financial tools in a very, very different way, unless we want just TradFi on chain, which would essentially still just continue the game of like wealthy getting wealthier. But if you think about it, if you really think about it, the fact that just the wealthy are getting wealthier, it's actually also a disservice to the wealthy themselves, because again, if I come back to my original thesis, is that we're just using a small percentage of all the truly productive capacity in the world, then like the overall wealth of the global society is smaller than what it could be if, I don't know, maybe the wealth was more equally distributed, and that enabled the fact that everybody in the world could essentially build to their full potential.
No, but I mean, wealth is represented by our financial means currently, the traditional ones. And my question is, do you think we can completely separate from it and say, okay, we need a new one, we need a new wheel, and exactly for that you need a new way of financing the poor people or the people who don't have the wealth, basically, right? So is it, I mean, for every new crypto company that is developed or cryptocurrency, you need traditional finance to support the initial output, right? So that's why my question, can you do it without it? Can we separate?
Yeah. I think I would disagree with the statement that wealth is represented by money. I'm paraphrasing here, but the wealth is represented by what you can buy with the money, and that's the whole point, right? Because I think that ties into the previous question, which is, in a way, if we just print, more money and just give it to other people, but there is still the same amount of goods that you can buy for the money, that wouldn't change anything. Nobody would get wealthier. What I mean, but when I say wealth, I mean the amount of goods and services and the quality and the quantity of them that you can buy with the money. And the only way how to make the global society wealthier is if you produce more solutions to the problems that people have, which is by, taking the people who undoubtedly are capable of doing much more, but are for some reasons bound to sewing shoes in a Nike sweatshop.
Thank you so much. I actually have a question which is not prepared, but you were talking about weird shit that should be built, and it's really a call for action. Can you give us 1 or 2 examples of what you have in mind of weird shit to be built?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, so the point is, I mentioned, for example, the Friends tech. So just to give you, I didn't mean to shill my company here, but what we are building is a lending protocol where you can use literally anything as collateral. And so what we did yesterday is, and we're going to be tweeting about it, so you can read about it on our Twitter if you're interested in learning more, is that we're taking Alex Masmey and his Alex token, which is essentially, if you think about it on a deep enough level, it is a financial representation of his social capital, in a way, at least in the Web3 space. And he's using this as collateral, so he's using his social capital as collateral for financial transaction. He's going to be taking out a loan and essentially arbitraging the money that he gets from the credit from this transaction to arbitrage that to buy up his apparently currently undervalued shares on Friends Tech. Does it sound ridiculous? On one hand, yes. Does it sound like trying weird shit? Also 100% yes. So do I see everybody in the world doing something like this and that enabling the global wealth? No. Do I see that as an experiment that's hopefully going to produce a lot of learning? Absolutely yes. But it is not that important what I think. The main idea here is that whenever you guys, because you are absolutely brilliant minds, when you think about new product, new feature, new anything or suggestion to your favorite protocol out there, try starting from completely clean slate and try imagining that anything is possible, because again, I believe that in this current sandbox where we are, anything indeed is possible.
Thank you so much. I love the call for action, be experimental. Thank you, Steve, for concluding the morning.
Thank you.